Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
It's 1,000 words fighting back, coming down to the finish. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is one stunning picture.
1,000 words just in front. 1,000 words wins the Robert B. Lewis.
Honorary P is full out now, second on the outside, and they're coming down to the line, and 1,000 words has done it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Past the Wire TV. Today, this morning, actually, I have the privilege of having Naomi Tukker as a guest on the show, fresh off the winning of an Eclipse Award, which is quite an accomplishment in the sport of kings and queens, obviously. Congratulations on the award, Naomi. We'll talk a little about that, and thank you so much for coming on Past the Wire TV.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And of course, when it comes to the Eclipse Award, first things first is that it was a huge team effort. Peter Thomas Fornatel contacted me about it. He worked together with Matthew Taylor from At the Races, and they came up with the idea. And Pete was like, hey, would you like to join us and do a couple of the writings, do a couple of the interviews? And I was like, absolutely. Because in general, when Pete asked me if I wanted to join him on any project, I tend to say yes, because they're always
Right.
a lot of fun. And I like talking to people in racing. It's obviously something that I do for a living. So I feel just very fortunate that I was allowed to play a role in this article that turned out so beautifully. And of course, you know, immense gratitude goes out to all the people that so graciously gave us some of their time to allow us to listen to their memories and allow us to write these down and share these with the racing industry, but also with the world. I mean, this is going to sound quite deep, but we've had a couple of challenging years within the horse racing industry, and to be able to share these special moments, to be able to broadcast why we love this sport so much, seems to me more important now than ever. So to be able to do that and for it to end up looking as good as it did, I mean, I'm very, very proud of that team effort. And of course, getting recognition from the industry for it is the cherry on the cake. Is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, no, and congratulations to the whole team. It was a great production, great effort, and you know, I think you brought a lot to the table, and you know, I personally enjoyed one of your interviews that we actually corresponded about a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit about that because I have a terrible habit when it comes to racing. I don't watch any other media shows. I don't read any articles. I'm the worst. I don't even watch my own. Like sometimes people will say, hey, did you watch your show? Maybe you could do this better, or maybe you could do that better. Did you listen to that podcast? You sounded this way. And I'm like, you know, I have never watched one of my shows and I have never listened to one of my podcasts. So listening to or watching anyone else's that's certainly not going to happen. The one that I listened to and thoroughly enjoyed was the one you did with Frankie Dettori. And I thought that was great, and I let you know it. And I think he's a great interview and a great character. And the funny thing is, I had told you, I was like, the one question I wanted you to ask him never came up. And interestingly enough, okay, I met him and got to spend a little time with him shortly after that.
Really?
At the Breeders' Cup, we were both at the Edwin Gregson Foundation dinner for John Gosden, and I got a chance to talk with him. And we were talking and having fun. And I said, listen, I says, man, and I mentioned your interview and told him that I loved it. We were talking a little bit about that. And I said, I've got to ask you a question that didn't come up in that interview. And he goes, oh, I know what's coming. I said, you have no idea what's coming.
Did he know? Was he right there? Did he know?
No, he did not. He says, I know what you're going to ask me, and go ahead, get it over with. I said, no. I says, I'm not, you don't know. I said, but we're talking as friends. This is just between you and I. It goes no further. What I want to know is what was in your mind coming down the stretch in the Breeders' Cup Classic on Swain? And he was like, said something in Italian that I understood because I speak Italian. And he was like, you're right. That's not what I thought. I thought you were going to ask me about drugs. I'm like, no, that's a different part of your past. And that's, been, I hope that's behind you, but not at all. This is what I want to know. And he said, I'm going to tell you now, one-on-one, exactly what was in my mind. He goes, but it's between us. So I can't go into what he said, but he did finally.
Come on, you've teased this
I
whole
can't
thing.
do it. I can't betray his confidence. But he actually answered the question in a great way, and it was a great conversation. And it was just really interesting. And I finally got the answer that I've been trying to get all that time. And it made a lot of sense what he said. But had it not been for your interview and it bringing that up again, and that being the one media interview that I've listened to in the past, I don't even know how many years, I probably never would have mentioned it to him. So that I thought you did a great job with that. And it was fantastic. I actually listened to it twice. And like I said, I don't listen to anybody. So kudos for that.
I'll take that as a big compliment. It's funny because when you asked me about Swain, remember I went back to the part where we discussed it briefly, and he mentioned saying I messed up on Swain in 1999. So he mentioned it, but he didn't give an explanation. And
I really put him on the spot with it. I really put him on the spot with it. The one part I will say is that he did say something to the effect that he probably learned more in that race than any other race in his entire career. And it never happened again. What happened in that race, I will tell you that. He did share that, and it was just interesting. And as you know, he's a great guy to talk to. If you enjoy talking racing, which I can tell you do, he's one of those guys in racing that you can just talk all day and just be very greedy with his time, because he'll just keep talking racing with you.
It's his love, just like it is ours.
Right, exactly.
That you love, especially with industry people. So sometimes I feel like I do fall into that trap a little bit when you're talking to industry people that absolutely love it, know their stuff. You can just go on a tangent, right? You just roll. And for example, my fiance is not in horse racing, and he'd be with me at the races, and he just kind of going like this, right? And I'm like, sorry.
Right.
So sometimes I do try and make sure that if someone doesn't know as much about racing, how do I get the gist across to them? Why are we so animated about this? Why is this so special? And I feel like that part, telling the stories and kind of, well, I wouldn't say dumbing it down, but making it explanatory for people that didn't grow up with it, or not. Well, I actually didn't grow up with it myself, so maybe that's a good, relation to it. But to make sure that they also get it. For example, like I said, my fiance, but also my closest friends, my family in the Netherlands. Shout out to my mom, who's there on the screen because I'm looking to her soon. To get them to enjoy it too, that you don't need to know everything. You don't need to know, it's nice to know some of it. Now, my fiance now knows, Secretariat, and he knows American Pharaoh and Justified. Even if they just know a couple, right? That's still
great. Starts that way, yeah. I mean, one of the things I think, and we know racing's had a lot of issues and a lot of negativity over the past couple of years, and the sport has certainly changed. And a lot of our problems are brought on by ourselves, and some of them are just brought on by natural changes in the way we do things, like simulcasting and betting on phones and apps, as opposed to having to go to the racetrack, has its positive side, but has also a negative side when you see, the grandstand in the clubhouse during the week and there's nobody there, so there's good and bad and all that. But one of the things I've always noticed, and it still exists today, and I look at it as a very big positive at certain meets anyway, but there are certain racetracks that when you walk into, and let me know if you feel this as well, but you walk into Saratoga, or you walk into Keeneland, or you walk into Ascot, and you just feel the history and the excitement and the electricity that, no matter what day of the week it is, no matter what card or who's running, you walk into those venues and you just feel it. It has a certain feeling to it, an air to it. And I think, technology and the fact that we do watch so many races from home and bet on our phones and computers takes away from that experience. And I think that experience helps bring people and fans into the game and get to experience that passion that people like you and I have. And I think that while technology is a benefit in a lot of ways, in that way, it hurts us a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like yes and no, because I think there's two facets to this. That one, we need to modernize and we need to facilitate the development of these technologies that allow you to watch any sport, bet any sports from the comfort of your home. Every other big sport does that. So for us to not engage with that would be silly. So we do.
Right.
So I think that is absolutely correct that we have to. Now, on the flip side, you indeed have, boutique meetings that people go to for the atmosphere, for the racing, for the whole package, right? But I agree with you, but I do feel like there's a couple of sort of facets to this, that the public that's sitting at home betting, looking at things on their phone, they have a certain objective for what they're doing. They're watching it because, well, either they love watching horses, they love figuring out the puzzle of a race, which is a puzzle, right? You're trying to be right. You're trying to be correct in your prediction. I feel like those are people that might enjoy those boutique meets as well. But those people that, let's say, go for Saratoga for a day out, it's a family tradition or that kind of thing, they might not be after that experience of sitting on your couch and betting, because they're after that whole package. Now, do I feel like we bring a lot more people in with that whole sort of package experience? Yes, because I do believe that being there, breathing in the atmosphere, seeing the horses up close, actually putting a face to the name when you see the jockeys, when you see the trainers, I think that's absolutely vital. So I agree with you, but it's tricky because what we have to do as an industry is still facilitate all the technology, facilitate the bettors, because they pump in the much needed wagering turnover that we need to fund just about everything. But we also need to still allow people to want to be present, like they want to be present at a baseball game, at an NFL game, the place that you want to be, not because you're betting it, because I don't go to a baseball game and bet that frequently now. I have bet, but I don't bet as much as I would at the racetrack, right? Like I wouldn't. It's not, I'm not an expert on it. I probably just bet for the fun of it, but I'm not going to bet. I'm going because I love being there. I love seeing it. I love, getting some fries and a drink and walking around and seeing everyone get excited. That's what I'm there for. So I feel like you have to cater to these different people and perhaps different generations that want different things. It's hard for us, like we're looking at a sport that is rapidly aging. It's hard for us to say, okay, what do we need to change to bring in those new people? Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, why do people go to all the other games? Why is that different? Why do they go? What makes it so special? And I feel like when you're coining Saratoga, Ascot, or even Royal Ascot, you're talking about Keeneland, I can say Happy Valley in Hong Kong, where there's a party every Wednesday. Why do people go? Because it's an experience. Because you want to know what it's like to be part of this fun, exciting day where there's music, there's a beautiful venue that you go to, you can get food, you can have a little wage, but everything is a part of that. I feel like that is something that we need to keep marketing to people, and also us industry players have this responsibility, I feel, to try and keep bringing people with us and tell them about it and show them and explain. So Kentucky Derby, my fiance got promoted. I took the day off, so I wasn't working. I think we had about 20 people in our house. Actually, so that was this year. We were all vaccinated, just before anyone goes. We were all vaccinated. And so we all came to, so I printed out the PPs for the race, started explaining it to everyone, go, hey, this is one of the first things I look for, right? These are the kind, the buyer numbers. I like to look at these. And they all had them. And then we all did a thing that everyone could write down which horse they thought would win. And then we had like a pot, and it would get shared for the ones that got it. And I think one of them had Medina Spirit. So, it worked out well for them. I think I was on Hot Rod Charlie, and so was my fiance, still like Hot Rod Charlie. But they enjoyed the experience because we had NBC Sports on, right? Phenomenal coverage. Absolutely. Like, my favorite racing show to watch, NBC Sports, because it's so high end. I love, of course, watching the Fox Sports shows because I worked with everyone at Naira. I think what they do is terrific as well. But NBC Sports, the boutique thing that they do, the budget they have, is just impeccably executed. So I love watching that and showing my friends and family how beautiful it can be whilst engaging them. So I do feel as industry participants, we are in a prime position to do that and to explain to them and say, hey, this is what I look for, this is what I like, or explain about how are the horses being looked after, what do we do with them, how, what do people behind the scenes do that you don't see, how much we love these animals, how it is an industry, but it's also a passion. Like, you wouldn't be there at 4 a.m. if that's not what you wanted to do, work with these animals, and you're so exposed to them all the time that if you didn't love them and the game, you wouldn't be there anymore after a year. It's that intense. So I do feel it's great to showcase that as well. And I think as a sport, we are trying to do that. And I think we just have to continue, but we have to keep our minds to the fact that there are different objectives for a lot of the fans that are involved.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you said, actually, and to be fair, we're not the only sport that faces this issue. I mean, baseball was the American pastime for years and years and years, and you watch some of the games now during the year, and the stands are empty. I mean, people are watching on TV, but there's not just a lot of people at the ballpark anymore. Unless it's a big game or the playoffs, and even then, there are seats available, which years ago you just never saw. So we're not the only sport that faces these challenges. I think it's just an evolving world, and how we do things and how we participate in our sports, like you said, is evolving and changing. You are a graduate of the Godolphin Flying Start program, correct?
Yep.
Interesting program. Can you tell us a little bit about, what it is, what it does, what's involved in it? How does someone get selected or get involved in that? What is the Godolphin Flying Start program all about?
So it's a graduate leadership management program. So I heard about it actually when I was quite young and just starting in racing. I didn't even have a Bachelor of Science yet. I do now. I have a degree in psychology and media communication. You do have to have a degree because, like I said, it's a graduate program. So it's meant to be further education after university related to the thoroughbred industry, but all the facets of it. So, you're looking at managing a business or setting up a business within the thoroughbred industry, or being an executive, or really propelling the sport forward. That's what it was made for. That's what it was created for by Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. Of course, incredibly generous of him to do so. What it did for me is, you go through a lot of tests. Probably the most rigorous testing in terms of like IQ, EQ,
Really?
group work that I've ever done. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
I mean, you get into university and you do exams, but they want to know what kind of person you are, personally and professionally, because you have a group of 12 people that travel the world for 2 years. They want everyone to bring something different to the table so that you can learn from each other. So what is it that you are good at, and how do you fit within a group? And that was obviously very interesting, and they do that to try and have as good a group as possible. And I was very fortunate to have 11 really wonderful people on my course. And yeah, you travel the world, which I had already partly done. I love traveling. I'd already worked in Australia. I was in England for a multitude of years where I got my degree. I'd already been to Hong Kong to do the international sales there. So I like traveling and I like working and racing across the globe, but this completely ramped it up. This was 2 years of multiple months in every part of the world where there's notable racing that you need to know about. So we were in, we finished off back again in Ireland. We start in Ireland, we move to England, we go to America, we go to Australia, then we go to Dubai, and then we go back to either Ireland or England. You finish off in Ireland, but I did my final internship in England with racing TV there, which was awesome. And so what you do is you create this incredible network of people that you meet, because there's lectures, there's visits, there's all these kind of things that allow you to speak with these people that have already done very well in the industry. So it opens up these doors to listen to absolute experts on just about anything, which allows you to be incredibly well-rounded and know a lot of different aspects of what goes on perhaps behind the scenes. You're looking at marketing companies, stallion syndication, you're looking at, you go to a lot of farms, you work on the farms. I had never worked with broodmares before. I was always the racing side, so I was an exercise rider. I went racing a lot. So I worked with mares and foals and with stallions, and I'd never done that before. So I very much enjoyed the variety that it allowed you to sort of, you're allowed to learn every little bit. And then for me, I think, well, in general, anything is what you make of it. But I already knew that I wanted to go into the media aspect. So I was able to do a lot of my, what we call externships. So you do a month with a company in those different places. They were all media related. So I did racing.com in Australia. I worked in the PR section from Dubai Racing Club in Dubai for that meeting. I ended up being mentored by Amy Zimmerman, who is Senior Vice President at Santa Anita Park, who's also a producer for NBC Sports. So I also got to go with her to the Belmont Stakes when Justify, you know, when he won the Triple Crown. So it was like you were allowed to learn about. I hope it still continues, because I saw I was signed out because of another thing.
No,
yeah,
you're fine.
Oh, perfect. You're allowed to learn about so many different things. So for me, it changed everything. For me, it allowed me to come back to the US. I worked with Naira. That was because of Amy Zimmerman. She was able to, you know, put me forward for a job on the production team there. So I learned so much from these incredibly talented producers, on-air broadcasters, camera guys, anyone behind the scene. And then the job came up here at the Maryland Jockey Club, and I applied for it. And I got it. So that's kind of been the story. But the Godolphin Flying Start allows you to kind of go, hey, this is what I'd like to learn. I'm going to do all these different things, but I'm going to focus on something, which is what I did. And then use all the connections that you make, try and keep good relationships with them, and hopefully see if you can establish something in return. And I was very fortunate to have a mentor like Amy, who is still to this day a big advisor to me, who I very much listen to. So to me, it changed everything. I wouldn't have been here without this program. Now, it's of course challenging, and sometimes you're kind of like, oh my God, because there's a lot of work, you know, personally, professional, it's challenging. It's meant to be, right? So it's not all going to be, or you're just having a ball, you're gallivanting around. Like sometimes you're kind of like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is hard. Now, for me, it was a bit easy because I'd already been away from home since I was 18. And I did the Flying Start when I was 25. So I was already used to living away from my family. So that made it easier. But I do remember, and that's, I think, still a thing for a lot of people that haven't like full-time been away for like 2 years, you can get homesick, and you can kind of go, there's a lot of pressure involved because they demand you to do the very best that you can do, because you owe them that, right? They allow you to learn and to go around, but they demand that you do the very best you can do to really make you this well-rounded individual. That's a lot of pressure sometimes, right?
No question. Yeah, no question. And I never realized that it was that intensive a program with, you know, that much testing and that much travel. And 2 years is obviously a long time. That's, you know, that's a commitment from both sides, from them and from you.
But for me, it changed everything. And I think for a lot of people, they've created incredible networks, Flying Start networks as well. I know a lot of the graduates, which is a lot of fun. So it was amazing. And I think anything worth doing is never going to be or come easy. And I think this is an example of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, you've had a chance to see racing all over the world. Okay, like you said. I would be interested in hearing your take on the major differences in the big jurisdictions. And one question that I would like you to answer or at least comment on is racing in Dubai, where they don't have gambling. Okay. How different is it? Like what are the dynamics of that? Because here, everybody is of the opinion, and myself included sometimes, that, hey, without the gambler, we don't have any racing. We'll be running for blue ribbons. And, you know, maybe that's not so true, because in Dubai, they run for big purses. Obviously, it's a wealthy country, and that you know, plays in. But what are the dynamics of racing without gambling? And then, if you can, talk a little bit about the differences in the, you know, the major jurisdictions and, you know, the major differences in racing, you know, in the US, the UK, Australia, and, you know, how all that plays out, if you would.
Well, so in Dubai, it is indeed quite interesting because you don't have wagering in Dubai itself. Now, there is wagering on the Dubai product, but in the UAE, you are not allowed to wager. So initially, if you don't know or you're not focused on it, you don't actually notice it when you're at the racetrack, right? You still have commentators, you still have people trying to predict what's going to happen in the race. They're just not mentioning prices, right? So when we say, oh, I love that 6-1 value, that's not a thing, right? You're not using that. So you're saying, I think this horse is a bit of a more, you know, he's not the obvious choice in here. Maybe that's how you would phrase it. So you are still trying to, you know, put all the pieces of the puzzle together. There's still, of course, a lot of prize money involved, a lot of prestige involved. So in terms of ownership, the owners are still getting what they're hoping to get out of their, you know, out of having these racehorses like they would in any other country. So the only difference, if you're an industry player in there, would be indeed if you're there, you can't wager. So if you're looking at these professional punters, you're not going to be based in Dubai. So that's not going to happen. But like you said, it is a wealthy country. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum is incredibly bound on continuing to increase the sport within the UAE as well as across the globe because he loves it that much. So in a way, we are very lucky that there is someone that has the financial means to put on these race meetings, that continues to have these financial means to do so, support an industry that we love and create opportunities like the Dubai World Cup, you know, like Cigar coming over, like Arrogate showing what he can do up there. Like, I am very grateful that that was there because we wouldn't have had that. And you saying, no, there wouldn't be any racing here if we didn't have the punts. I think because it's funded here differently in the US and in any other places. Like, we don't have a ruler of the state saying, I'm going to put this money in and I'm going to allow you to do this and put this on. So we fund it differently. And that is because of the wagering turnover, because of the take out percentages at the track or from the ADWs. So it's just a different concept. But when you are at the track and when you're involved as, for example, an owner or a trainer, it is actually not that different.
And so the fans at Dubai, the fans, although they're not wagering, are equally as enthusiastic as the fans here, correct?
Well, so really interesting. Yes, they are, you know, they can be quite loud. A lot of people living there, you know, it's a sport that they enjoy watching. So even, let's say you are rooting for a baseball or an NFL team. If your team's winning, you're going to be really excited, right? No matter what, if you had a bet on them, right? You're really excited. So there's definitely been, like, you know, people looking up to trainers, people loving jockeys, or people loving horses. You know, how you fall in love with a horse that's maybe perhaps, you know, one of those geldings that's 5-6 years old. They've been around for a while. They keep winning. People are very, very excited. Now, there's also something different though. It's somewhat of a lottery ticket thing that you can do to kind of get around the rules a little bit. Now, I'm not an expert on what they do with that, but you can put your picks in and you can put it in, and it's like a lottery system for everyone that had the correct picks that you can then win a lot of money. So there are certain things that they are doing, but they're not coined as being wagering per se as how we see them. But there are ways that people do get a little bit involved in Dubai. Now, if you're looking at some of the other jurisdictions, for example, I find Hong Kong really interesting because Hong Kong has a huge wagering turnover, but as RUM, you know, the racing product is fully run by the Hong Kong Jockey Club, which is a non-profit. I think the world's 7th, like on rankings, biggest non-profit in the world because their turnover is just incredible. So they donate a lot to, you know, swimming pools and schools in Hong Kong because of their income. Now, I think it's interesting for the owners and trainers there, because that is a different concept. The owners actually have to get approved, have to get a license because of the space is so limited. Not everyone can have 10, 20 horses. You might only have a license for 4. And if you want to get another license, that's either part of a bit of a lottery too. Also, you have to be a Hong Kong Jockey Club member. That's sort of kind of high standing. You have to get recommendations. That's a tough club to get into. And then for the trainers, they don't actually pay their own staff. That is done by the Hong Kong Jockey Club, because the Hong Kong Jockey Club gets them, you know, basically runs the finance aspect. So they're involved with the owners, they're involved with paying the staff, and then the trainers would get their share. So that's a completely different way of looking at it, because a trainer, they're still in business, but they're not running a business like they would in the USA or in the UK or even in Australia. So I always found that concept really interesting too. And
it's fascinating.
It's completely different, right? It's very, you know, I think for some trainers, they loved it because it takes away the business aspect for like having to hustle clients or having to be like, hey, you still have to pay me. You don't have to do that. You're going to get paid. Right. And it just all is surely focused on how good are you as a trainer? Like, can you make this happen? And it's also about relationships, of course, like which owners allocate you horses, like, are you capable of delivering for them? You know, that other pressures get into play there.
I
So
would
yeah,
also argue, and it might not be a very popular opinion, especially here in the States, but I would probably argue that the racing there, um, for the better. And I was a professional gambler for many years and made my living betting on horses, which is extremely tough to do, and probably something I couldn't do today if I had to. But I was able to do it for a good number of years. I think today, if I had to say the most level playing field for the gambler of racing across the globe would be Hong Kong. I think the playing field there, and that probably ties a lot into the structure and how they do things. If you told me, hey, John, tomorrow you've got to go back to making your living betting on horses, I'd probably pack up and move to Hong Kong. If
right.
if they'd let me in, I don't know, but or just bet online. But I think that's the most level playing field right now. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm thinking to myself, top of my head, I'm not sure about the exact takeout numbers that you probably know, but I know that the pools are gigantic. That
Right.
the money wagered into the pools means that if you are correct, especially with your exotic wagers, they love exotic wagers over there. You are actually gonna get a very, very strong payout. Where I guess if you are looking at the US, some of the smaller tracks, your pools aren't gonna be as big. So even if you're correct in the same way that you would be correct on a race in Hong Kong, you're gonna see
Right.
a much more return for your investment than you would over here. So in that perspective, I could see what you're saying. Now, I'm not sure about the takeout rates. Like I said, you probably know them better than I do. 'Cause top of my head, I don't know exactly how high they are. But what I do know is that also with the co-mingling during the big meets, I think with Hong Kong International, they co-mingle with the world, makes it like exactly what you want as a
Right.
way, as a better.
No, absolutely.
Those are
Absolutely.
the kind of pools you want to tap into.
Right. Now, racing here in the States, we touched on it earlier. We've had a lot of issues, a lot of negative things to overcome. It seems that a lot of times when we get any mainstream press at all, it's geared towards the negative as opposed to the positive in the sport. And a lot of people don't know a lot of the positive in the sport, and I understand that. I'll often say, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and one bad incident or bad actor or character can, paint a very negative picture towards many that are doing the right thing with their horses. But with that in mind, and with your global experience and expertise in all aspects of the game, having been an exercise rider, someone who knows how to read past performances and make a wager, someone who's involved in media and behind the scenes, what would you say are the most important areas that racing in the US needs to tackle and improve on to kind of win back some of the people that kind of soured on us from just hearing just the negative stories out there, and the bad press that we tend to get? What are the areas that you would say are the key areas? Hey, this is what we need to be focusing on to kind of paint ourselves in a more, I want to say, better light, and I'd like to think a more realistic light, because I'll be the first to say there are some problems, and we need to address them, but there are a lot of people doing the right thing as well. So how does Naomi think we go after that and tackle that?
So that's also, quite a broad question. And unfortunately for any sport, but especially for us, as you highlighted, most news is going to be negative news, because positive news tends to not really make the news, right? If you look at, in general, if you're watching the news on TV, you are going to see deaths, robberies, hurricanes, whatever horrible things are happening in the world, they're going to show them to you.
This is true.
The problem is that's obviously the case with us here in horse racing as well. And you were mentioning there's so many people doing the right thing. Unfortunately, there might be one out of thousands that does the wrong thing, and they're the ones that are coined as the representative of their sport, even though that is not the case at all. So I feel like we are working on this. To me, it comes back to accountability and safety, because the main thing that we keep getting grabbed on is how are we looking after these horses? Because there are our stars. What are we doing with them throughout their careers? And where are they going after? Do we know where they go? Are we rehoming them? Do we have tabs on them? Do we, the stories of horses ending up in slaughterhouse, things like that, those are still prevalent. So I feel like if you're looking at, it's multifaceted, but it all comes down to how well do we look after our athletes that can't speak up for themselves. And that's when you look into certain things happening with trainers giving drugs that making the news, because that's happening to these horses, right? That is detrimental to the health of these horses, which is, something that upsets me greatly and something that I feel we are tackling and we ought to continue to tackle on all fronts. One of the examples that what I love that they do in Australia, because Australia faces the same criticisms, by the way. They have very healthy racing industry. They also have people bashing into the Melbourne Cup parade, saying up to the cup because of, the horses, horse racing deaths, horse racing abuse, as they coin. What they do and what I love, I think it's in Victoria they do, I'm not 100% which state started it, but they have tracking on each and every thoroughbred as to where they go after they finish their career. They can pull up in the system, put in a tracking number and say, this is where that horse is. Now, that is, of course, huge. How are you going to fund it? How are we going to do that in the United States? I don't have answers to that. I know that the moment you start coming up with things that might, that you might think is a good idea, you have to look at logistics. And that is very challenging in a country that is as large as the United States is. I mean, like 335 million people, give or take. It is huge. So logistics are and funding are something that are going to play a role. But if I had to focus on one thing, it's about the accountability and safety towards our superstars, which are the thoroughbreds. So, I think that that's something that a lot of tracks are looking at. How can we make the track safer? How can we have veterinaries being involved so that we make sure that horse that we think shouldn't be running are going to say, hey, you got to wait it out, come back another day, really ensure the safety. Now, that is a huge undertaking, but I feel like that, to me, is the first thing we need to look at in tackling these negative reports, because they always come back to this. They tend to always come back to this, right? If you're looking at
absolutely
or things happening, horses being neglected, those are the things that are making all of us look bad, even though it might just be one person out of hundreds or thousands. I mean, I hope it's like 100,000s, of course, and that there might be one person.
I think you might be selling that a little short, but we
a million, like a lot more. Please don't.
I think it's worse than you're saying, but let's go with your numbers.
No, we'll go with like millions, because thankfully I know so many horsemen and women who live and breathe for their horses. Now, I was a stable lass. They ate before I ate, right? Their blankets go on first. We do everything first before I go to bed. I might have done a day that I started at 5 a.m. and I didn't get back until 11 p.m. But those things get done first before I go home and eat and sleep, because they come first. And that has always been the case. Every trainer I've worked for, because if they aren't doing well, you can't be successful in this sport no matter what you try. So it is the first and foremost basic thing that any good trainer could tell you, and you see them do, is that they have standards, they have routines, their staff care, and everyone does their best to make sure that these thoroughbreds are looked after in the best possible way. And thankfully, that is a general theme across the world that I see for any trainer I've worked for. Unfortunately, there might be one or two rotten apples that make it look in the media like we don't. And that's, I guess, the hardest part, right? Making sure that it is a standard across the nation or across the world that we are looking after these thoroughbreds, because without them, we don't have a sport.
Yeah, no, I agree. The horse absolutely has to come first. And at the end of the day, I think you're more judged by whether or not you took care of your horses properly than by how many races you won. And I think that's an important point. Let me ask you this, and let me try and ask it the right way. And bear with me here, because I'm not educated like you. I don't have a lot of media journalism training or anything like that. Dropped out of high school and just been in racing my entire life. So I'm going to try and ask this the right way, because I think it's an interesting question. But as a very knowledgeable and successful lady in racing, you do hear a lot of talk about how it's difficult for a lady to break into our sport and to achieve success in our sport. And you hear the same thing about minorities, okay? And obviously I'm not in that position, so I really don't have a good frame of reference. I can't honestly have a good opinion on that except what I see. Is that the truth? Is racing tough for a lady to break into and become successful more so than a man and even a minority? If you have any insight into that as well, is that a legitimate gripe, or is that just something that sounds good and an excuse or something like that? What is our industry like for someone to break in that's, you know, not a man in a man's game or a man's world, so to speak? And I hope I asked that properly.
I can only speak from my own experience. So obviously I don't want to, you know, say that other people's experience aren't as valid. All I know is what I've encountered. I feel like any industry you go into, best practice would be to be judged on your merit, what you bring to the table, what kind of skills you have, how you make a difference. And I feel like I've been very fortunate that that has been the case for me. Wherever I have worked, I've always made sure that I bring value, that I pull my weight, that I am there to do a job, and I do that to the best of my abilities. And I have been, you know, respected for that. So I feel very fortunate that that has been the case. So from my point of view, I haven't encountered it as much as what you sometimes see or come across on, you know, TV. But that's not to say that it doesn't happen, or that there aren't occasions that someone feels like perhaps their gender or their color of their skin or their origins are being used against them, because that could be a subjective feeling that is very valid. If it's intentional or not intentional is obviously hard to say, because that depends on every situation. All I can say is that I've been very fortunate that everyone that I've worked with, every company I've worked with, I have been treated as an equal to anyone else on my level. What I've been doing, you know, as an exercise rider in media, that I've been given the chance to show what I can do and to, you know, get respected for it. So it's a really, really tough question, because like I said before, I believe that everyone should be based on what kind of experience do you bring? What is your attitude that you bring? You know, are you easy to work with? That should all be valued irrespective of the way that you look, where you come from, or what gender you have. I don't think that has any bearing on your capability of doing a job. Now, you were saying, you know, in the industry, that's kind of perhaps the idea that as a man, it might be easier because perhaps it's obviously a historic sport that has been, you know, in general, seen a lot of men do very well, especially in the past. Now, of course, if you look back at historic sports, you're also seeing that in general, men and women were doing different activities throughout the years, right? Like in general, right, certain cultures that said women were supposed to do certain things and men were supposed to do. So when you see these men do very well, it's because, you know, they chose that career that perhaps other women at the time didn't feel like was appropriate for them. I feel like that has changed. When I look at horse racing, from my point of view, what I've seen across the world, like even as an exercise rider, I remember being in Australia, more than half of the exercise rider, if not more, were female. Right. So I'm looking around and I'm seeing lots of other riders just like me, right? So I've never felt that I wasn't allowed to be there, or that I wasn't as good as anyone else based on gender. And it is tricky. I think it's an ongoing work in progress for us, for any industry, to make sure that anyone feels like they're being treated fairly based on their merit, because we need everyone that loves horse racing, right? Irrespective of your gender, irrespective of where you came from. We need everyone that wants to do this to feel like they can and to come and join us, because we are not in a position to turn anyone away. Like, horse racing is an absolutely beautiful sport that has given me a life that I'm so, so grateful for. I've met so many amazing people. We should not be looking at anyone with a preconceived idea of what they can or cannot do. I feel like if you're looking at perhaps the American dream, if you're looking at horse racing, I do believe that we can allow everyone to move through the ranks. Now, is that, like I said, ongoing work in progress? I feel like I've been treated fairly? Yes. But like I said, that is my experience. So that is not to say it hasn't happened to others. So that's why I'm a little bit, you know, hesitant in terms of answering this, because I don't know what other people might have experienced. And I feel very fortunate that I have felt welcome. I'm not from a racing family. I'm not from a racing background. I didn't start in horse racing until I was 18. I felt valued by everyone that I worked for and worked with. But yeah, of course, you still get your banter, you still get your things.
Right.
Backside, that's horse racing.
Right. Yeah, that's everywhere. Right.
That's everywhere. That to me has never been a serious thing that would ever oppose me of moving on or doing other things. Now, in terms of perhaps people saying physical strength, but female riders and male riders, it's a really interesting concept, because I do feel like certain horses love the touch of a female, or certain horses like one person better than the other. I don't think you can quantify that. I've worked with very talented male and female exercise riders. I see very talented male and female jockeys. So that's something that I get, but I think you need to take on a case-by-case basis to say, how good do I think this person is as a rider, no matter what their gender is. So my opinion is that we are on the right path, and we just have to continue, because like I said, I would love for everyone to come and join us, because I want this sport to last for as long as possible, even further into the future. And we need every young person that wants to get involved to feel like they are going to get a fair opportunity to be a part of this.
That's true. And I've taken so much of your time, and I appreciate it. Two things I'd like to close with. One is, you said you first got into racing when you were about 18. What happened? How did that happen?
So I did pony racing when I was like 14, 15.
Right.
And the girl that organized it in the Netherlands said, "Oh, do you want to go to a trip to Newmarket? That's where they started horse racing." I'm like,
right.
Okay, yeah, cool,
right.
Sure, right. So we go on a plane, we go to Newmarket, they took us to the National Stud. And I remember going to Warren Hill, which is one of the gallops, got like a multitude of gallops there. And it was a cold, misty morning, and I saw all these thoroughbreds working up the hill with their Whitney sheets on, the beautiful colored sheets.
Right.
Kind of foggy. And I looked at, these horses going up, the strength and the riders on there. And I was like, I don't actually know exactly what they're doing. Right. I know how they train horses. But I'd like to be a part of this, because I think this is really, really cool. I'm going to be a part of this. And whilst I was there in Newmarket, so I was 16 when I was in Newmarket. And then I did an interview for the British Racing School, which is a 9-week foundation program. You learn how to ride thoroughbreds, how to look after them, basically anything, how to run a barn. I ended up running their test barn at the time, because they also do research, thoroughbred research. And I got accepted. So I went there when I was 18. Cried myself to sleep for the first 2 weeks, because I'd never been away from home for that long, because I moved, right? I went to a different country. They didn't speak my language. They spoke English. Now I speak English fairly well now, but at the time I was good enough conversational, but I wasn't fluent. So I thought, one, the culture was really weird and everyone was speaking weird. And so there was a lot of things to get used to, but I decided that I wanted this so badly. So I tried my utter best to become as good as I could. And then once you finish your program, you get placed with a trainer. That's your first job. Mine was with Alistair Littledale, who's now back as an assistant trainer. He doesn't train anymore, but that was a dual purpose yard. It was a small yard. And it was actually a really, really good experience, because I got to ride horses every day. And I went and traveled all over England, and I just learned. And that was going to be a gap year. I was going to return to the Netherlands. I think I got accepted to study veterinary medicine in Utrecht, so to become a vet. Right. And I did not do that.
Okay, obviously, right?
So yeah, no, I stayed. I liked it. I liked horse racing. I liked England. I didn't really have a plan. I just decided to stay and see what I was going to do. And I ended up staying, and then later on moving on to being an exercise rider for Malcolm Mustard, so more freelance, breaking in yearlings, educating them, doing 2-year-olds, going to Hong Kong for them. And then I did my degree whilst I was doing that. So that's kind of how it all got started. And then I started doing some media stuff, because I like writing and I like photography as well. So I felt like everyone was very welcoming to me when I expressed my desire to learn all these things and my desire to do different things. So
you've got an across the board wealth of experience and in so many different areas of the game. We'll close with this. Betting. What kind of better are you? I know you pay attention to buyers, all right? You kind of telegraph that a little bit. You read past performances. You do have an opinion on figuring out the puzzle, as you referred to it. What kind of handicapper and what kind of better is Naomi Tukker?
So obviously, growing up and racing in Europe, I love the more simple wagers. So I'm not one for your very complicated wagers. I like to just bet a horse to win. We call it on the nose. That was supposed to be the ballsy thing to do. So that always stuck with me. If you have a strong opinion, well, why don't you bet them to win? So
I like it.
Doing that because it's literally putting yourself on the spot. So I love doing that. Now I use, like you said, I use buyers. I also use Time from US. Love, the first thing I do is look at the pace setup. Who's going to be where? Because if you have a very strong front runner that is in cheap speed, that doesn't stop, and he's by himself, he's going to be by himself, that's going to move this horse up, right? So I love seeing, are there certain factors there that could help a close? Like, are there a lot of speed horses that are going to come back to him or her? So I love, the first thing I do is pace. First thing, look at pace. I love looking at horses in the paddock. If I'm betting for myself and I'm not doing any broadcasting, love trying to have a quick glance at the PPs, but kind of not too much, right? When I can paddock, then look at how do I think the race might evolve. Does that suit this horse who I think is the standout? If it does, I'm going to place a wager. Now I do, as a personal, I wager when I see opportunity. So that probably wouldn't be every race. That would be where I think a horse is going under the radar, or like I said, a horse is looking really good in the paddock because I feel there's value there. Whereas sometimes in a race, you kind of go, I think this is going to happen, but my opinion might not be as strong as another race would be. So I am kind of mindful of that. I think anyone playing the game, that would be a good tactic to use, right? Where are you confident? Like, what do you think you got this figured out? Or do you think, you know what, these are all very closely matched. I can make a case for 4 out of these 10.
Right, 100%.
Right. So yeah, I'm pretty straightforward. I did get my fiance got into like the pick 5s and the pick 4s. Yeah, he would have had the Breeders' Cup Juvenile pick 5, that last race that everyone did. So,
that fiasco race that Friday. Yeah.
That would have been his first payout of a pick.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So, a lot of people left scratching their head after that race.
That was really, really unfortunate because we got him into doing pick 4 and pick 5s, and I was very fortunate that my opinions were pretty spot on that day. So I was like, wow, awesome. Like I gave him the right horses. I made me look good and our game look good. So yeah, I do like those wagers, and I do like, if I have a strong opinion in a race, I will for myself start keying around with your exactas and things like that, or like keying certain horses and playing different exacta boxes around it. I like doing that, but I do believe that it's tough to be right all the time in terms of, are you right about who comes second, who comes third, who comes first, whatever it is, right? It's hard to be right. It's hard enough to just pick a winner. So sometimes I like to do that if I'm really strong in my opinion. But in general, I like keeping it simple because it's hard enough to be right about one horse or how you think it works out than to say, I'm going to have the ice cold super, right? That's really hard.
No, you're 100% right. And some of those principles are principles that I lived by when I did this on a much more serious level than I do today. Although I'm still serious about it, it's not like I was. The last thing I'll say, and I'll ask you this because you kind of alluded to being in that situation. Sometimes I get asked because of past the wire and having some type of social media presence. What's your opinion of this race, or what's your opinion of that race, or who do you like here? And you're kind of on the spot and you want to promote the game and you want to be positive about it. So I'll share that opinion, although it might not be something that I'm actually betting on myself. Okay. And when I actually feel more pressure in that situation than if I'm betting 2,000 to win on a 15-to-1 shot, that means 30,000 to me if the horse wins. If that horse loses, hey, I took my shot. I'm a big boy. I've done this before. I can walk away without batting an eye. But when someone puts me on the spot and I'm like, oh, I like this horse, and people are watching or listening or reading and they don't win, that actually hurts me more and makes me feel worse than if it was my own wager. Can you identify with that? Do you know exactly what I'm talking about? Do you feel that way?
Yeah, because it makes you feel really bad because they
Right.
trusted you and then you were wrong.
Exactly.
So I'd
Right.
much rather be wrong for myself because
Exactly.
I did
You
that.
can quietly walk away and like it's like falling and getting up and nobody saw it's okay, you know, right? But when
And my
everybody's
choice
looking at
to
you,
wager, my choice to wager whatever I wagered, but someone asking you for your opinion and then trusting you, it's hard. So
it's
like
brutal.
doing simulcasting, giving your opinion, even if I didn't play that race, I'm
Right.
so happy if I'm right. Because
Right.
I'm thinking if someone might have taken my opinion and then I was wrong, I feel bad because they trusted me to know what was what. Now, you're never going to always be right. And sometimes it's a mental challenge of making sure you don't get too bummed up in it. Because sometimes I have terrific days that I'm literally tipping. I think one day I tipped like 8 out of 9 on top. Now, that's one day in 2 years, just FYI. Like, that's really hard, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you get really excited, but that doesn't happen every day. Like, you're very happy if you're hitting at, like your 20-30 percenters, you're doing really well. So if you just keep
Absolutely.
giving a couple winners,
Right.
but that also means you're going to be wrong a lot of the times. And especially if someone asks you, that's hard.
Well, horses humble everybody. Horses humble everybody, and we are
Yeah.
all wrong more than we're right. So
the only thing that if someone asks me about race and I'm really not so strong in my opinion, I might divert them to a different race that's coming up that I do like a certain horse or have a stronger opinion. So I can say, hey, you know what? I find this race challenging. I'm not 100% sure. I think this is what's going to happen. But
Right.
in this race, I love the number 6, right? I love this horse. This is going to be perfect. You can divert it a little bit to say, not too sure about this spot, but it's coming up in 2 races from now, a horse that I love. Maybe want to look at that one too, aside from this race, if you want to, like I feel like doing that sometimes helps for me a little bit.
Yeah.
And like I'm stronger here. I'm more confident giving you that, tout.
Yeah, no, for sure. Naomi, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was absolutely delightful getting to speak to you, getting to know you a little bit, letting some other people get to know a little bit more about you and what you bring to the table, which is a considerable amount. I mean, you do bring a lot to the game, and that's great. We need a lot more people like that. So I thank you for not only coming on the show, but for everything that you bring to the I want to say the sport of kings, but we'll say the sport of kings and queens. So thank you so much.
I like that. No, thank you so much for having me, Jonathan.
I'll stop the recording now, and then we can say goodbye real quick off camera. Okay.
Nobody does it better.